A fishing trip to Shasta Lake, a tale of mystery and intrigue. The sun hung low in the sky as I made my way to Shasta Lake, a hidden gem nestled in the heart of the wilderness. Known for its pristine waters and abundant fish, it was the perfect escape from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. With my gear packed and a sense of adventure in my heart, I set out for what I hoped would be a memorable fishing trip. Upon arrival, I was greeted by the serene beauty of the lake. The water shimmered like glass, reflecting the vibrant hues of the surrounding forest. Tall pines swayed gently in the breeze, their needles whispering secrets of the wild. I quickly set up my tent on the lake shore, the rhythmic sound of water lapping against the shore providing a soothing backdrop as I prepared for my first evening of fishing. As dusk descended, I cast my line into the water, the bobber dancing on the surface as I settled into the tranquility of the moment. The air was filled with the sounds of nature, the croaking of frogs, the rustle of leaves, and the occasional call of a distant bird. Hours passed, and I caught a few decent-sized trout, their silver scales glistening in the fading light. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, an unsettling feeling began to creep over me. Night enveloped the lake, and the world transformed into a shadowy realm. I cooked my catch over a small fire, the flames crackling and casting flickering shadows around me. As I sat there, savoring the taste of fresh fish, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I glanced around, half expecting to see someone lurking in the trees. After finishing my meal, I crawled into my tent, the fabric a flimsy barrier between me and the wilderness outside. As I lay there, the sounds of the night intensified. The wind rustled through the trees, and the water lapped against the shore in a rhythmic cadence. Suddenly, I heard it, a distinct sound of footsteps crunching on the gravel path leading to my tent. My heart raced as I strained to listen, the footsteps drawing closer and closer. I grabbed my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. With a deep breath, I unzipped the tent and stepped outside, the cool night air hitting my face. The beam of light swept across the area, illuminating the trees and the ground, but there was nothing there. Just as I was about to dismiss it as my imagination, I heard a loud splash from the water's edge. Something had jumped into the lake, sending ripples across the surface. I stood frozen, the flashlight trembling in my hand. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it an animal? A deer? Or something more sinister? I called out into the darkness, my voice echoing back to me, but there was no response. The night felt heavy with an unseen presence, and I quickly retreated back into my tent, zipping it up tightly as if that could shield me from whatever was lurking outside. Sleep eluded me as I lay in the darkness, my mind replaying the events of the night. I listened intently for any signs of movement, but the only sound was the gentle lapping of the water against the shore. Eventually, exhaustion took over and I drifted into a restless sleep. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of rotors slicing through the air. I stepped out of my tent, squinting against the bright sunlight, only to see a rescue helicopter hovering above the lake. My heart sank as I noticed a small crowd of people gathered at the edge of the water, their faces etched with concern. I approached. My curiosity piqued and overheard snippets of conversation that sent chills down my spine. Missing for 3 days now, searched the entire area, found nothing. As I stood there, a sinking feeling settled in my stomach. I learned that a local fisherman had gone missing, last seen near the very spot where I had been fishing. The authorities were conducting a search for him, but so far there was no sign of life. My mind raced back to the strange noises I had heard the night before. The footsteps, the splash. Could it be connected? As the helicopter continued its search, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. I decided to pack up my gear and leave Shasta Lake, the beauty of the place now overshadowed by an unsettling mystery. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. In the days that followed, I learned that the search for the missing fisherman had been called off. He had vanished without a trace, and the lake returned to its tranquil state, hiding whatever secrets lay beneath its surface. I couldn't help but wonder about the strange presence I had felt, the footsteps that had echoed in the night, and the splash that had shattered the stillness. The mystery of Shasta Lake lingered in my mind like a haunting melody, drawing me back to a place I had hoped to escape. Weeks passed, and I found myself unable to shake the memories of that trip. I read everything I could find about Shasta Lake and its history, uncovering tales of lost fishermen and unexplained disappearances. Each story added another layer to the enigma, and I felt an irresistible pull to return, to uncover the truth behind the shadows that had haunted my last visit. One crisp autumn morning, I packed my gear once more, determined to face whatever lay in wait at the lake. This time, I brought along a notebook, ready to document my experiences and observations. As I drove along the winding roads leading to Shasta Lake, the vibrant fall colors painted the landscape in hues of gold and crimson, but the beauty did little to ease the tension in my chest. Upon arrival, the lake was as serene as I remembered, but the air felt charged with an unspoken energy. I set up my tent at the same spot where I had camped before, the memories of that fateful night flooding back with every rustle of the leaves. As dusk approached, I prepared my fishing gear, determined to catch something more than just fish this time. As I cast my line into the water, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. The shadows lengthened, and the sounds of the forest seemed to grow louder, more pronounced. I caught a few trout, but the thrill of fishing was overshadowed by the gnawing curiosity about the mystery that surrounded the lake. As night fell, I lit a fire and cooked my catch, the flames flickering like ghosts in the darkness. I tried to convince myself that I was merely being paranoid, but the feeling of being watched returned, stronger than before. I resolved to stay alert, to confront whatever it was that had disturbed my peace during my last visit. After finishing my meal, I sat by the fire, jotting down notes in my notebook. I wrote about the missing fishermen, the strange noises, and my growing unease. Suddenly, a branch snapped nearby, causing me to jump. I shone my flashlight toward the sound, but again there was nothing, just the trees standing sentinel in the moonlight. Then I heard it again, the unmistakable sound of footsteps, this time accompanied by a low, guttural growl. My heart raced as I gripped my flashlight tighter, the beam shaking as I scanned the area. The growl echoed through the trees, sending chills down my spine. I called out, my voice trembling, "Who's there?" Silence enveloped me, thick and suffocating. I felt the air grow colder, the shadows around me deepening. Just as I was about to retreat to the safety of my tent, I saw a figure emerge from the darkness, illuminated by the flickering firelight. It was a man, disheveled and wild-eyed, his clothes tattered and dirty. "Help me," he rasped, his voice hoarse and desperate. "You have to help me." I was taken aback, my instincts screaming to run, but something in his eyes held me in place. "What happened?" I asked cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. "I was fishing. I got lost," he stammered, glancing nervously over his shoulder as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. "There's something in the water, something that doesn't want me to leave." My mind raced. Could this be the missing fisherman? "Are you the one they're searching for?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, his eyes wide with fear. I saw it take my friend. We were out on the boat, and then it came for us. I swam to shore, but he didn't make it." A chill ran down my spine as I recalled the stories I had read about the lake. Tales of a creature lurking beneath the surface, preying on unsuspecting fishermen. "What did you see?" I pressed, desperate for answers. It was like a shadow, a shape in the water. I thought it was just my imagination, but then it lunged at us. I swear it was real." His voice trembled as he spoke, and I could see the terror etched on his face. Before I could respond, the growl returned, louder this time, reverberating through the trees. The man's eyes widened in terror, and he stumbled back, nearly falling into the fire. "It's coming! We have to go!" I grabbed my gear, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I prepared to flee. But as I turned to run, the water erupted in a violent splash, sending waves crashing against the shore. From the depths, a dark shape surged upward, breaking the surface with a force that sent chills down my spine. The moonlight glinted off slick, glistening scales, revealing a creature that was both magnificent and terrifying. It was larger than any fish I had ever seen, with elongated fins that sliced through the water like knives and eyes that glowed with an otherworldly light. The man beside me screamed, his voice raw with panic. "It's here! It's here!" He stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the logs piled near the fire. I felt a primal urge to run, but my feet were rooted to the ground as I watched the creature rise higher, its massive form breaking through the surface of the lake. "Stay back!" I shouted, raising my flashlight, though I knew it was a futile gesture against such a beast. The creature turned its gaze toward us, and in that moment I felt a connection, a strange understanding that transcended fear. It was as though it could sense our very souls, weighing our intentions and fears. "Run!" the man yelled, snapping me out of my trance. I turned, adrenaline surging through my veins, and sprinted toward the trees, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound of splashing water echoed behind me, and I could hear the creature thrashing, its growls mixing with the sounds of my frantic footsteps. I didn't look back, but I could feel its presence behind us, a dark shadow moving through the water. The man was close on my heels, his breath ragged and desperate. We dashed through the underbrush, branches clawing at our skin as we navigated the dense forest. The growls grew more distant, but I knew it wouldn't be long before it decided to pursue us on land. "Where do we go?" I gasped, glancing over my shoulder. The moonlight barely penetrated the canopy above, casting eerie shadows that danced around us. "We need to find a way to escape. There's a cabin," he shouted, pointing ahead. "I saw it when I was lost. If we can reach it, we might be safe." I nodded, my legs burning as we pushed ourselves harder. The cabin was a beacon of hope in the darkness, and I focused on reaching it. As we neared, I could see its silhouette against the moonlit sky, a rustic structure that seemed to have been abandoned for years. The windows were dark, and the door hung slightly ajar, creaking ominously in the breeze. "Quick!" I urged, and we dashed inside, slamming the door behind us. The cabin was musty and filled with dust, remnants of a life long forgotten. I fumbled for a light switch, but it was dead. Instead, I pulled out my flashlight, illuminating the room with a shaky beam. We stood there, panting, listening intently for any signs of pursuit. The growls had faded, but the air felt thick with tension. "What do we do now?" I whispered, glancing around the room. Old fishing gear and faded photographs adorned the walls, remnants of a time when this place had been filled with laughter and life. "We wait," the man said, his voice trembling. "We need to catch our breath and think." I nodded, though my instincts screamed at me to keep moving. I scanned the room, looking for anything that could serve as a weapon. A rusted fishing rod leaned against the wall, and I grabbed it, feeling the weight of it in my hands. It wouldn't do much against a creature of that size, but it was better than nothing. Minutes passed, each second stretching into an eternity. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of our heavy breathing. Just as I began to relax, a loud thud echoed from outside, followed by the sound of splintering wood. "It's trying to get in!" I shouted, my heart racing again. We moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. The creature's massive form was silhouetted against the moonlight, its eyes glowing like embers as it circled the cabin, searching for a way in. "We have to do something," I said, panic rising in my chest. "If it breaks through..." "Look," the man interrupted, pointing to a trapdoor in the corner of the cabin. "We can hide down there." Without waiting for a response, he rushed toward it, pulling it open with trembling hands. I followed him, and we climbed down into the darkness, the musty air thick with the scent of damp earth. The trapdoor creaked ominously as he closed it behind us, plunging us into near-complete darkness. "Do you have your flashlight?" he asked, his voice a whisper. I nodded and turned it on, illuminating the small space. It was cramped, with wooden beams overhead and dirt walls surrounding us. "What now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The man looked around, his eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. "We wait and hope it doesn't find us," he replied, his voice trembling. The darkness pressed in around us, and I could hear the pounding of my heart echoing in the confined space. We sat in silence, listening to the sounds above us. The creature continued to thrash against the cabin, its growls mingling with the splintering of wood. I felt a deep sense of dread wash over me, knowing that we were trapped beneath the earth, vulnerable and exposed. Suddenly, the growling stopped. A heavy silence settled over the cabin, and I exchanged a worried glance with the man. "Do you think it left?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. I don't know, he replied, his eyes darting nervously around the small space, but we can't stay here forever. Just then, a low rumble reverberated through the ground, followed by a loud crash above us. The trapdoor shook and dust fell from the ceiling. I felt a surge of panic. It's trying to break in, I exclaimed, gripping the fishing rod tightly. We need to make a plan, he said, his voice steadying despite the fear in his eyes. If it gets in, we have to be ready to fight or run. I nodded, my mind racing. What if we try to distract it? Maybe we can lure it away from the cabin. Good idea, he said, his expression shifting from fear to determination. But we'll need something to draw its attention. I thought for a moment, then remembered the fishing gear scattered throughout the cabin. The old tackle box. If we can make some noise with the gear, it might draw it away from the door. He nodded, and we carefully opened the trapdoor, peering out into the dim light of the cabin. The creature was still circling, its massive form casting an ominous shadow. I could see its glowing eyes scanning the area, searching for us. Now! I whispered, and we climbed back up into the cabin. I rushed to the tackle box, rummaging through the old lures and weights. Here, I said, grabbing a handful of metal weights and a couple of lures. We can throw these out the window. Do it, he urged, glancing nervously at the door. I opened the window just a crack and tossed the weights and lures as far as I could. They clattered against the ground, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, the creature's head snapped toward the noise, its eyes narrowing as it focused on the source of the sound. It worked, I exclaimed, relief flooding through me. The creature lunged toward the noise, and I could see its massive body crashing through the underbrush, momentarily distracted. Now's our chance, the man shouted. We have to get out of here. We raced to the door, flinging it open and sprinting into the night. The moon hung high above us, casting a pale light on the forest floor as we dashed through the trees, the sounds of the creature fading behind us. We didn't stop until we reached the edge of the lake, panting and gasping for breath. As we looked back, the creature emerged from the shadows, its form silhouetted against the water. It let out a roar that echoed through the night, a sound that sent chills down my spine. But we were free, and we didn't look back as we ran toward the nearest road, desperate to escape the horrors of the lake. Later, as I sat in my car, the engine running and the headlights illuminating the dark road ahead, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that lingered in my chest. I glanced at the man beside me, still trembling from the encounter. We need to warn others, I said, my voice firm. People need to know what's out there. He nodded, his expression grave. We have to tell them to stay away from Lake Shasta. It's not just a fishing spot anymore, it's a place of nightmares. As we drove away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The lake, once a serene escape, now held a dark secret, a warning for anyone who dared to venture too close. The stories of the missing fishermen, the strange noises, and the creature lurking beneath the surface were no longer just tales. They were a chilling reality. And as the headlights cut through the darkness, I made a silent vow to spread the word, to ensure that no one else would fall victim to the terror that lurked beneath the waters of Lake Shasta. The tranquility of the lake had been shattered, and it was a warning to all who sought its shores. Sometimes, the most serene places hide the darkest secrets.